I've been off for 6 weeks, and I have to say at this point from the outset, Nick, I owe my life to the NHS. I wouldn't be sat here, really. I wouldn't be sat here today if it wasn't for them, for the doctors and nurses who treated me.
What was the date you fell sick?
So I fell sick on the 6th of March, and it started waking up on. It was Friday going into the Saturday. I started with aching limbs, flu-like symptoms, but I could generally do normal things, and I could still eat, and I could still I could go for I was at home, but late at night I'd go for a walk just to try and do a bit of exercise, and it got progressively worse through the course of that week, and I noticed towards the end of the week I was having trouble breathing. So the cough started 5-6 days in, and it got progressively worse. But when it came to the point where I realised I was in real trouble and I needed help, it felt like I was drowning. It felt like somebody put a clamp around my chest, because the coughing fits, I couldn't clear my chest. All I had was fluid. It felt like water was just sitting there on my lungs, and I was unable to breathe. And I remember my wife saying, well, we're talking, what should we do? And I just said, call an ambulance. I'm in dire trouble here. I don't know, I can't breathe. And I'd been to the toilet and I'd pretty much collapsed. Afterwards, from a coughing fit, I was coughing up blood. And Alex and Pete turned up, the first responders. These guys were in their early 20s, and they came in, and it was pretty clear early on, just from the initial test, the number all the doctors and nurses seemed to take very seriously was oxygen saturation levels, and they should be between 94 and 98%. But mine were right down, and that's the amount of oxygen when you breathe it in gets into your. They were going down into the 80s, right. 70s and 80s, and they were too low, and they immediately gave me oxygen and in my living room, and that was. That didn't come off my face for 5 days, that same oxygen pipe. And they took me into the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel. And I remember being at the entrance to the section of A&E, which is cordoned off for COVID patients, and just feeling this intense fear of what was to come. And I went in, we were taken inside, and I had a chest x-ray, and they said, you've got pneumonia, both lungs. And it was one of the fears they had at the time was there was blood clots on my lungs, which could travel to other parts of my body and kill me. Fortunately, that turned out not to be true, but it was a very scary time. But within 2 and a bit hours from being in my living room, I was in a separate room on a ward. It was an isolated room on a ward, having been treated with antibiotics. I mean, that's incredible. 2 hours, diagnosed, course of treatment plan organised in a room, and it was for about 2.5 days where it was just.
Were you conscious all the time?
Yes, I mean it was quite difficult. It was. I wasn't fully. I was a bit out of it.
Yeah.
It was very difficult. You have sort of snapshots in your own mind of what you go through. Certainly at the beginning, it was hard to be conscious of everything that was going on, and a huge amount of sleeping, but you're not with it.
Were your family able to visit you?
My wife was there at the beginning. Yeah, she was there at the beginning, but after that, no. And that was terrifying. But I had so much love. You know how much love I had from the LBC listeners and from people in Westminster and from Fresno. You sent me a text, I think. You said, hang in there, mate. And I sent you a text back saying, doing my best. Yeah. And I really was doing my best to stay alive.
I very rarely text anyway, so you're very full. You want to keep that.
Okay, lucky, I'll keep that one for posterity. But the doctors didn't know how to figure it out, and they were changing the antibiotics. I was on 3 different types of antibiotics, and then I had another. Then they weren't working, so they upped it to a different antibiotic. But the nursing, Nick, from Sister Jane, who looked after me, she looked after me like she'd look after her own son. This woman was just incredible, and nurse sits here, and they'd come in, and you're looking. Emotionally, you're looking for a life raft. Your life, a month earlier, I'd been playing football on the beach with my son in the south of France, Kofi. And at 38, I'm relatively. Sometimes you see me in my cycle kit. I'm
You're
relatively.
very cycle to and from work. For those
I'm
who've
a
never
relative.
seen it, there's no weight on you at all. And you cycle all the time.
I'm
you
a
don't
relative.
smoke, do you?
No, don't smoke. No. I'd got to a point where I could. I'd never thought I'd be in this position, and suddenly you're there, and all the power is taken out. You're helpless, and the nurses came in, and they never made a mistake. That was the incredible thing. I was on four different
Incredible
trials
for you when you consider your line of work.
But it's incredible, isn't it? When you think you set a bar about what's a good breakfast show, and when it falls below, there's some shouting going on. I set a bar about what I think is a good political report, and I sometimes fall below that, what I think is a good political report. And your listeners, whether they're joiners or electricians or whatever, or nurses. But the thing is about the NHS, they never made a mistake. In 6 days, they always got there was never a confusion about my drugs. I had various wires coming out of me. Maz, who took my blood, came in. He took my blood. This guy drew blood better than Dracula. I mean, it was incredible. He never missed a vein. And when you're when everything is falling apart, you rely on these people. They're just incredibly talented, and they found a way through for me. And I got over that.
Did they have enough kit? Were they wearing the sort of masks that we see now?
So they weren't. They didn't have face visors.
No.
They only had the face masks.
Proper ones though, with ventilators, not the ones you get from Wix.
No, the ones you get. The ones that you get. They only had the face masks, and it's playing. It's playing on my mind that that these people could be ill because they were treating. They were now very ill because they were treating me, and they robed up outside, and then they came in. But they never once. Nobody ever complained. They were just this incredible resilience, this strength in the way they treated me.
So when you think of the personification of the NHS, it's probably, is it Sister Jane?
Sister Jane. I mean, Sister Jane was, and Nurse. I mean, they were phenomenal. And they came into the room, and you knew you were in. I knew I was in. I knew I was getting the best possible care. They were brilliant. They were so calm and collected, and they were always. I could barely speak, Nick. I couldn't get words out. I had to leave my oxygen to go to the toilet, and it was I had a toilet to the side, and I couldn't. I was just racing to get back to my bed to just put the oxygen in.
God. So how long were you at that level of illness?
4 days. It was 2.5 days where. It was 2.5 days where it was just in the balance, and you're
much like the Prime Minister. He talked of 48 hours.
Yes, it was 2.5 days, and it wasn't. The scary thing is it can go the other way. So you can get an infection in your lungs, and that can become a sepsis, an infection in your blood, and that can cause huge problems in other organs of your body. And the drugs they were trying just didn't work, and they're figuring it out. This is quite early on.
Yeah, indeed,
So they were figuring it out.
Like early to mid-March that you're being treated.
Middle of March.
So we're a month on. And how long were you in hospital, Theo? When did you get out?
6.5 days. 6 days, just under 6 days.
And I spoke a couple of times, and I hope you don't mind me saying your voice was very thin, and there was no way you could have come back on air.
No.
How long did it take? And I suggest you take it easy today as well. I don't think you want to put in one of your mammoth days, but how long before you actually started to feel you were back in the game?
So I did a week pretty much of bed rest at home, and then I sort of tried to become more involved, but that didn't quite go according to plan. I got quite a bad throat infection, which is when we spoke, and I couldn't
work then.
I couldn't work then.
No.
And then and that's a warning to anybody who's coming out. Just do lots and lots of bed rest, because otherwise I tried to do too much too quickly, and ended up with a throat infection. That was okay. I stayed at home for that. I didn't have to go back to hospital. It was just a throat infection.
So, lastly, Theo, great to have you back on board. But from what you have endured and survived, what have you learnt about the NHS?
It is the most phenomenal organisation, and something that perhaps when I was looking at social media and what people are saying, and that's lost or could be lost, in danger of being lost, is amongst the arguments about PPE and testing. It has the most incredibly talented people. I received the very, very best care, and something that stuck with me was, and it's not a competition compared to different countries, and I'm not trying to portray it as that, but I remember when things were bad, and a quote from Chris Whitty, the chief medical officer, stuck with me. And he was asked about whether people should travel abroad. And this was in the early days, and I was still working. And he said, don't go anywhere which has a weaker health system than our NHS. and it just stuck in the back of my mind. And it's not a competition, because countries across Europe and the world are battling this deadly infection. But the NHS is the absolute best. I cannot get over, and I cannot reiterate how, in the face of such adversity, Nick, how talented, how caring, how wonderful these people are. And I did have the opportunity. I did have the opportunity to just to go back, and of course it's all hermetically sealed now.
Of course it is.
I did go back. I went to Sainsbury's and I just got a couple of bags of. I mean, it's nothing. Got a couple of bags of shopping of chocolates and bits, and I just took them to one to the A&E and one to the ward, and it all sort of came back. Just what's a fun-sized Twix and Maltesers going to do to say thank you? But these guys just. This country would be in such trouble now if it wasn't for them. They're amazing. They're incredible, and I owe them my life.